thank you to, ah, got it. Uh, Thank you to everyone at Central Mass ATD for hosting me. I'm so pleased to be here and to share with you our presentation tonight. So we're going to go right to screen share and get started. As you can plainly see, our title this evening is about mindset techniques, specifically around instilling presence and resilience. And then some subheads here went for the alliteration about passion and purpose, perception and positivity. It certainly spans more than that. Much of this is based on the core concepts from my book, Zisms. If your insights to live by is what a Zism is. And I'm looking forward to sharing more about that with you. Now, just to make this a little bit beneficial, just to see everyone here gets the most out of this, I just want to put things into context. First off, the content and the style here is somewhat atypical, right? We're, as Kara said, we are talking about building personal capabilities. And so we're not really focusing on a professional skill or best practices like leadership or communication. And from a personal standpoint, we're really going more of a mile wide on these concepts than we are going deep on any of them. There are a number of concepts in here that I do separate individual presentations on. And we're really focused on holistic ways to improve well-being in particular and to live better. So one thing I want to call out that I'm hoping to do is that you all are going to come away from this conversation with everything that you need to have your life be better. That's why I write a personal development book and bring all these concepts to you. Now, a little rule breaking, it is, I'm respectful. I am speaking to L&D professionals. It's a little content heavy. It's a little ambitious. We are going to have 2 breakouts. Hopefully we have time if you'd like. I'm happy to stay and do a post Q&A. Now, we have an intimate group here. Ideally, everyone's going to be active and participating. We have a lot of interaction happening. We're all in this together. Right away and throughout, we're going to be getting into taking notes and some screenshots for your benefit. So just a heads up if you need to prepare to do that. And look, based on our topic about taming your distractions and the challenge of, all of us with our desks around us or wherever you're watching this from, you're already faced with distractions. So throughout the presentation, you're going to be challenged to overcome them. But for efficiency's sake, I am going to have you multitask in a moment on the next slide. But I think it's important just from a self-observation standpoint to notice your struggle with focus. It's almost like if you ever meditate and you're like your mind wanders and then come back to your breath, right? Some of that's still going to happen throughout here. All right, now into what I know from going all the way back to my initial career, the universal truth of there being no substitute for experience. This actually came up earlier in our conversation. And with that, I'd like each of you to do an activity now, while I also tell you a little bit more about myself, and this should come to you fairly quickly. What is it that you would consider to be your 2 top professional accomplishments, your 2 greatest personal triumphs, and your 2 major adversities that you've overcome? So if you need a second, take a screenshot, or you pretty much, I think, can handle these 3 bullets. So we are going to do a breakout, and this is what we're going to be focusing on midway. All right. Okay. Now, I am going to share with you my answers to those questions as part of my introduction while you're thinking that through for yourselves. This is actually my 3rd career. I started out in marketing communication, working for mainly public relations firms, became a director of an agency in Philadelphia, my early 30s, and then in 2002 started my own company, Z Communication. And then that evolved several years into a passion I had in and around the field of internships and innovating in and around that ultimately became a nonprofit that I ran for 15 years called the Internship Institute. And when I think of my top 2 professional accomplishments, I certainly have a lot to show for my work with the nonprofit. A grant in particular I did with veterans to help them transition from active duty to civilian jobs comes to mind. but truly, if I have to narrow it down, it's really what I'm doing now. As a single piece of work, the book, the audio book, and the courses are my best work, and certainly I couldn't be prouder of them. Now, also in fray here are a number of defining life experiences, and I have a lot to show for my entrepreneurial journey I've mentioned, but one of my personal triumphs has to do with being a lifelong ice hockey player. I'm a very serious athlete. I have an ice hockey game tonight, right after this, as a matter of fact. And I was captain of Temple University. I played for Team USA, the Little Flyers. I played at a fairly high level, though I was never going to go pro, but it's still such a part of me. But we went undefeated my senior year. So if you can imagine that moment, if you're a hockey fan, you are in the New England area. So, sticks and gloves, everyone jumping on, that moment of elation where you're all jumping all over each other, to experience that. It's such a high point in my life. That's certainly one of them. I was also a single dad for many years. My son Jake was 2. And it was 50-50%. It was really important to me. It had a lot to do with me becoming an entrepreneur and needing that flexibility. So, the reality of being, think man alone in an apartment, changing diapers, washing bottles, that's a real reality check that goes back some 20 years now. He's full grown man now. And I think with respect, when I say I have a single dad, now's when I really feel like I need to say, oh, I'm also married now. I'm married to the love of my life. There in the bottom, you see my family with my wife, Erica, and son, Jake, and her daughter, my stepdaughter, Greta, and she is a handful. Now, over to my personal adversities, which is also, my second personal triumph. Did I do that? Oh yeah, that's the other thing. A barefoot water ski pyramid. I trained in Canada quite a lot growing up, with and around hockey, but also became involved in water skiing. Can't be on the ice all day long. And this was the 6th time this was ever done at the time. You're looking at 1982, if you're wondering, and being atop the barefoot pyramid. Now, with respect to you all, I am asking you to consider the adversities that you've overcome, some of the most serious things that have happened to you in your life. And it is part of the taking stock that's really important for our conversation today. Personally, I've had to contend with depression since my teens, and it's been a lifelong battle for me. But something I do feel that through my recovery work, I have defeated it. And some of the tools and things that I've created based on that lived experience enable me to bring that to hopefully ease that for other people and help them overcome it as well. And also, near and dear, to me is affecting other members of my family, throughout my lifetime, people I know who've been afflicted with it. We all know people close to us, if not ourselves, who had to contend with, any number of challenges in this way. My brother, unfortunately, in part associated with an opioid addiction back in 2012, decided to stop living. My by far most difficult adversity to overcome had to do with my mom. And she, in the early 80s, contracted HIV in a blood transfusion prior to, at that very time, the blood being screened. And, from my late teens, from just graduating high school up into my late 20s, and I was very involved in being a caregiver for her. And, there's, I'm sure everyone can imagine, we've all been through different things, hopefully, not to that extent, but it was a very trying time, but something I'm also can be grateful to her for the resilience that it's given me, to this day. Now, this is a lot of personal disclosure all at once, and in publishing the book in particular, certainly a lot of this for me had remained very private. But now, once it's out there, especially through the pandemic, I've been very active trying to normalize the conversation around depression in particular. Now, Z University is the branding name under my Z publishing company. I published Z-isms, Insights to Live By just as the pandemic came out. I had to set the deadline for myself on Leap Day of 2020. And I have since evolved it in a number of different ways. For one, I wanted to go do the audiobook, and I couldn't imagine myself reading my book into a microphone. It just sounded really boring to me. And it led me to start a podcast, which continues to this day, now over 100 episodes, called Insights to Live By. So I have a lot of fun with that. I very much focus on the world of work these days, a lot of guests. But early on, I recorded one chapter at a time over time, doing solo shows that are now available as the audiobook. But what I also realized is that books by themselves, certainly the same can be said of a slide deck here, still do not instill you with the skills. They don't build skills for you. And I felt as though what I had set out to do did not fulfill its purpose. And I've written the equivalent of another 3 or 4 books since, in the form of activity-centric courses, starting with what's called a mindset reset. And then I, especially again, influenced by the pandemic, built a course for companies, specifically the well-being reset, of which the mindset reset is a part. And then there's a whole set of other courses, modules from the upper chapters of the book represented in what's called the life upgrade. Things continue to evolve. The concept of happiness, I'll share with you in a moment about, was never in the book. And it's certainly something very central as a backbone for the courses. Now, the question I often get, quite obviously, is, well, what's a Zism? And the answer is that these are the pearls of wisdom. These are the life lessons that we all have, that we all share, to enrich the lives of one another. And these are your insights to live by. So I would like, if you're willing to hopefully participate, everyone can share a Zism in the chat. What do you hear yourself saying to people? Even if it's a little cliche, it's okay. What matters is what hits home for you. So I'd love to hear what people think and consider their own Zisms. And when on my show with Insights, while you're thinking of that, on Insights to Live By, that is a featured segment. I ask people for, after getting to know them, and a lot of the guest shows focus on the world of work, then we get to know them a little better. But at the end, they share their top 3 life lessons. I mean, they know this coming into the show. Now, out of the 100+ shows, about 75 or so are guest shows. Rarely have I ever had the same one. It's amazing how many different pearls of wisdom come from each guest sharing them. So, Wendy is driving, so please, Wendy, no texting unless you can safely pull over, I see. Ryan, I mean, you're definitely living your world here. Keep learning. Absolutely. Absolutely. I have a hashtag, just keep growing. Kind of playing on the keep going one. So many, says Kara, that come to mind. Learn from your mistakes. Yeah, one of the things I say, is I think in the book too, a mistake isn't a mistake unless it happens twice. The first one's the learning experience. So, little quips and things throughout the book just to hit home. Anybody else at this time? Because we're going to move on. Please feel free to share that. And the other is what has evolved to be the grounding principle in and around Zisms as things have continued to coalesce, is happiness, the idea of being present and optimism in real time. So when you think of optimism, it's not present based. It's about hopefulness. It's about future thinking. And I couldn't really come up with anything that really quite captured optimism in real time. But even more so than being intentionally present is, oh, wow. Naji, relentless optimism, you and I already get along, is to have a reflex of positivity. That's exactly what Naji was just talking about. We have a choice. How do we react to the things that happen to us in real time? Developing that reflex. That's what we're working towards here. Okay. Ryan, my sense of you is you're not going to have a problem doing that if you already don't have that ability already. Now, with respect to you all, in referencing the capability model, as Kara mentioned, we're focused on building personal capability. We have to choose. You guys only really fit 7 or 8 bullets in each one of these. There's certainly a lot more that goes into what we're going to be talking about. Yes, emotional intelligence, decision making, but also communication, collaboration is part of it. Lifelong learning is part of it. Also to the right here, if you really want to go deeper on all these things that we're going to be touching on, like I said, we're going to be going more of a mile wide. It's all of these things. And so I'm about to get into what I'd like you to do here, by the way, as you look at this to the right, I'd like you to choose no more than three things that resonate for you in the power skills and or the holistic well-being skills that you would like to work more at doing. And then as we go through the presentation, I'd like you to home in on what it is that you're customizing for yourself that you are most interested to do. For me, what I hope you find as a result of experiencing this time together are to come away with these tangible techniques for self-evolvement. And well, hopefully you know what tangible is. That's the whole point once we get there. Elaine, you wanted to chime in for a moment.
Sorry, were we supposed to pick right now? Because I didn't pick three.
Yes, I apologize if I moved on too quickly. Just take a
Oh,
quick
no,
look
that's
here.
okay. Okay.
And at any time, you can, certainly we're recording this, but in any case, always feel free to take a screenshot, any number of these slides. One of the things I might have mentioned is I'm not going to be reading every bullet to you guys. You're going to be glad to know, and it's content heavy. I'm going to be asking you to read some slides as they go on the screen for efficiency's sake. So,
Okay, I'm all set.
good. All right, now, going to fly through these potential learning outcomes. And the reason why, again, these are potential learning outcomes are because we're just covering the content here. The real learning outcomes are having the practical activities that you're going to come away with and actually building the skills using. But again, I'd like you to look at what you see here on the screen and maybe choose 2, 3 at most. What are the things here that resonate for you? Are you wrestling with your inner critic? Do you feel a sense of imposter syndrome along that? Do you tend to worry? Or do you get future trapped by uncertainty in the likes of worry? Are you looking to up your game and be more present and experience more joy? All these things we're going to be talking about. You're certainly going to get out of this. But again, I think it's important to really, knowing yourself, decide what resonates most for you so you can really tune into what's covered related to that. Okay. Now, this is the slide that you'll see a few times throughout. This is our overarching slide. The theme that we're going to be guiding us, number 1, is to keep things in perspective, be present, and stay purposeful. Now, these are not equal parts. In fact, one build on one another. We're going to focus in on perspective because you have to have perspective in order to be present. And in order to experience joy in life and stay purposeful, you have to be present. So, but our focus here is on presence as the linchpin of it all. So let's begin with 3 filters that shape reality: perception, mood health, and the superego. So let's jump in and reflect a bit on perception. Now, this is easy just to take a glance at. We all understand the macro world around us, what happens within our brains, what colors, what shapes us, on and on and on. And then over into the micro, it's important to recognize, to have perspective, that even when something feels real, it doesn't make it true. And whatever it is that we're experiencing at any given time is still just an interpretation. It doesn't necessarily, it never reflects 100% of what's actually happening. For example, sensory distractions is a real easy one, right? All these thoughts we have going through our head all the time. Were we really listening? Did we miss something? It's easy just for something to get lost in translation, literally. And then we have interpersonal distortions that happen. That might be energy related. It might be mood related, on and on. So perception has a lot of moving parts. Now, back to my days in communication, what I went to school for, this communication theory is probably the one thing I still haven't practiced from college. You guys might recognize the Shannon-Weaver model of the sender-receiver feedback loop and all that's going on. You might have heard that people have 60 to 70 thoughts a day. It's not true. That stat is actually out there and not able to be brought back. It's more like 6,000 still in the waking hours. That's, about a thought every 10 seconds. There's also, and I know for me, because I make fun of myself, knowing myself, like I said, I have man brain. Because I can only literally do one thing at a time and process one thing at a time. So what you're seeing here is that broadband theory. You think of each one of those balls represents a piece of information. Only one ball can drop through at a time in order for you to comprehend and perceive it. So the point here is that with all these thoughts, all these different moving parts, a lot has to go right in order for you to really have an accurate sense of perception at any given time. Now, I know this is somewhat obvious, but we're here, we're talking about this. We really want to put this in perspective, why it's important. Now, this is out of the book. This is a tool called the perception snapshot, quite easily. And this is available on the website, among other tools we've been talking about tonight. Because we have so many moving parts, this gives you the opportunity to stop everything at once. So everyone will recognize whatever column matters for them down the left-hand side. And if you do a quick review without overthinking, positive or negative, what's going on in life, positive or negative, go right down. Now, if your basic needs are met and hopefully your personal health is okay, those your loved ones are okay, that's what matters, right? Everything else is circumstantial. So, put that in perspective. And then through this exercise, more than just seeing the visual, the first thing you do is be grateful, all the positives, all the things that are going on. But then when you stop, those moving parts, and you are going to have it, if not for long, you will have things in the negative section. You can then isolate it and say, is this really all that bad? Have I been here before? Have I overcome this before? What will it take to get out of it? It's a simple activity that I think you might find helpful. All right, so that's perception. And again, we're just kind of scratching the surface on some of these things, but these are the high points. Now, mood health, it's a chapter in the book. It reflects a lived experience. Mood health is not a clinical term. It's more about normalizing the conversation that we all have to be managing our mood. We all get depressed to one degree or another. It's just whether or not we have the elasticity in the brain chemistry to bounce back. So I illustrated this in the book with this mood scale, kind of like a thermometer, and who gets to define what normal is in quotations, you see. But we all kind of get a little bit hyped up, and we can get mildly depressed, and we're all striving for that balance. Now, when I say mood disorders, you could see I'm beyond the normalcy. I'm only reflecting on depression, anxiety, bipolar, anything in the mood category. We're not touching on anything super clinical in these other areas. Now, from a practical standpoint, again, it's universal. And I basically already covered this, but what I can tell you is depression, there's depression, and then there's depression. And that experience of sinking into quicksand is how I can best describe it, in having experienced it more times than I care to count. So what we're really talking about here is being intentional and our mood management. This is an activity that's out of, this is in the loneliness lessener tool in the well-being reset program. And while this shapes out to be an hour, start with 10 minutes and just set this up for yourself. Build up to 20 or 30 minutes. If you want, take a snapshot of this slide. Certainly conceptually, it's easy to follow, but I encourage you to come up with, what is that song that you would listen to? Key it up. All right. Everybody, I think, has got that. Now, as you know, this is very near and dear to my heart. There is a resource section on my website under the Zisms tab about mood health. There is another tool from the course in there that's free to download called the Depression Defeater. This is that lived experience tool. This is about coping skills. It's almost, in case of depression, break glass. And again, we all get low. So this is a short activity, and it'll give you a real solid framework as to what your action plan is when you're having your down days. And I do speak to something called the 3-day rule, which is how I, just as a quick sidebar, have defeated depression, because I know myself. And I'm always going to get, kicked in one place or another. That's the life of the entrepreneur. You're going to have a bad weather day. If I get to a third day, I get into action. I parent myself. I just no choice, because I know if I don't, the alternative is a lot worse. Now, I also, in addition to doing mood health on my show, I've been interviewed on about 100 podcasts, and the one that I'm really proud of was Giving Voice to Depression. There's a 2-part interview that I did. It's really the most vulnerable I've ever been on the topic. We really went deep, and they did a great job with the interview. So that has now over 12,000 listens between the two of them. So I'm really proud of being able to share that. So check that out. Now, over to the superego as we wrap up gaining perspective. If you need your quick lesson from Dr. Freud in distinguishing between the superego and the hidden ego, there it is for you. When we're talking about the superego, we're talking about your bully, your inner foe, this is where imposter syndrome comes from. This is what keeps us in our comfort zone. The important thing to really home in on here is that while we cannot control our thoughts, and we cannot control our thoughts, we can control whether we allow our thoughts to control us. And that's a skill. That's not anything you're going to walk away with here. But I think you'll find that worth working on developing. And in part, that comes with corrective self-knowledge, and that can undermine and in part defeat your inner critic, that being installing your inner coach. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. Okay, so with your actually a few minutes is now. With your superego, you can recognize your inner critic. What is your inner critic saying to you? Because a lot of this happens subsurface, right? We know this. We could go a half an hour and then realize, like, just right under ourselves, we were just beating ourselves silly without even quite realizing it, and then we already did it, and the damages. What are you saying to yourself? That's really how you can begin to get your arms around this and fight back, versus what you would say to yourself to counter those things as your inner coach. Now, this is another activity for us. I would like each of you just to take a quick shot, just a working name for your inner critic. This has to be a name that is not anyone you know. You can't associate this with exes or anything like that. It doesn't have to be your gender. It could be, your masculine, feminine energy, whatever that is for you. Just take a quick crack at it. You can always rename your inner critic. This is part of that equation. Again, practically being able to control, to fight back, to balance it out and counterbalance it. And not only naming it, humanize it. So after you name it, mine is Fred. So once you name your inner critic, it's not enough to just give it a name. You got to give it some form. You got to give it some personality. What does Fred look like? How old is Fred? Just personalize your inner critic, because what this reminds you of, most importantly, is that your thoughts are not you. You are not your thoughts, because we have these automatic thoughts going on all the time. And just because you think it doesn't mean it's true, doesn't mean it's real. A lot of it's your inner critic. And so you're disassociating what that inner monologue is by naming it, by humanizing it. And that way, when you catch your inner critic, and again, that's a skill, you're going to take practice. And I imagine that most of us that where we are in life are already doing a lot of this. You can tell Fred to, piss off, like whatever's happening, you can always just fight back and recognize and separate yourself from your inner critic. Okay. Now, that here in our transition slide, hopefully for you, puts things into perspective just about these 3 areas. There are other things that shape reality, but these are the 3 I've identified I think really stick out. So now let's talk about the presence paradigm and what we might look at as life currencies. Most of us think of the main life currency as being time, and time itself being infinite on one hand, but constant on another, whereas energy it's multivariable. It ebbs and it flows. You're gonna have better days, better times a day. The weather affects you, all of it. And then you've got presence, which is absolute. You are either present or you are not present. And I'd like you to start thinking about the present as a where, not a when. Right? So if we just take a moment as I'm going over the paradigm here, again, I asked you from the beginning, start to notice your distractions. What's pulling you away from, hopefully not getting tired of hearing me talk yet. What is your energy right now? What's your mood right now? Start doing these self check-ins. If you start out with 2 to 4 alerts on your phone a day for 1 minute, just to pull yourself out of whatever it is that you're doing and start working at this. You're only talking about 4 minutes a day, but having the discipline, start doing those self check-ins. Now, recognize that a day in the life, you typically from time say, well, what'd you do? What's your productivity? When you look at it from an energy standpoint, you might say, well, how did you feel? And it might be typically well-being related. When you're looking at presence, what did you notice? What did you experience? What joy did you have in your day? How easy is it for us to blink and have full days go by? I have a theory here about why time goes by faster the older we get. For a lot of people, because when we're kids, everything is present. Everything is now. Nothing takes you out of the present. Whatever you're doing, that's it. But as life gets more complex, as we've got jobs and all these things, so many forces that we're now having to work against that pull us out of the present. We have to fight back in order to be present, to experience the joys in life. And so I believe, quite honestly, and this is a hidden epidemic, if you will, that the utmost source of unhappiness is living in the not now. And most of us do not realize how unpresent we actually are. So now into our 3 forces of distraction: our past baggage, our future uncertainties, and our current ants, better known as automatic negative thoughts. So we're going to get through this fairly quickly, but I'm going to ask each of you to choose 2 from these categories. So when we're looking at past baggage, quite honestly, it's fairly easy to know what fits in the baggage category. I'm trying to think if there's one more. No, that was not. So pick 2. Pick 2. Hopefully maybe there's one. Is there anything on this list? A lot of us have done our work on ourselves throughout our lives. Is there anything still on the list that you find yourself still, I do have some resentments. I do have some, what is that? Home in on it again. We're trying to customize for you what it is that for yourself you want to work on coming out of this exchange. Same thing with future uncertainties, right? Worry, anxiety, fears. A lot of people don't realize we have these phantom conversations. It's another thing that takes us out of the present. We're always talking to ourselves. We're pre-hashing instead of rehashing. That meeting we have later, and we're running through our minds how that conversation is going to go when it never does go that way. It's just a whole other aspect of future uncertainties. We make these assumptions. Jealousy is the ultimate assumption. So, do you have a tendency to worry? Are you anxious? Do you have these phantom conversations with yourself? Do you make assumptions? Pick 2. I hope you guys are doing this, because at the end, we're going to be having you walk away with the things to do as a result of what it is that you're identifying. Now, automatic negative thoughts, that's the tough one, right? We're talking about our inner critic. You're probably familiar with negativity bias and the distortions that we have, and it's a lot easier to ignore the positive and focus on the negative. And pessimism versus optimism, you would think, but we're talking about happiness here. Just a little plug for happiness. It's not optimism in real time. And we have these ruminations. Same thing as rehashing the rehashing. These recent events, how many times have we gone through it? What are the conversations that we had? And run through our heads. Really start tuning into yourself about your tendencies in and around these types of things and working on your happiness reflex. Now, back to some of the statistics and the whole number of thoughts we have a day. This is a kind of a branch off of that, is that negativity bias that I think this is, but honestly, personally, I think this is exaggerated. The stat exists, but even if it was half of this, it's still relevant to recognize we have very high tendency to have negative thoughts. So just a reminder, back to our anchor slide here about keeping things in perspective, being present, and staying purposeful. A lot of what we're really at the midpoint. A lot of what we spoke to here is kind of the problem solution, right? We talked about really the problem in and around gaining perspective, things we talked about there, and the things that keep us out of the present. Well, now we're gonna fight back. How do we do that? So we talked about the reality filters. We've talked about your forces of distraction with unpresence. Now let's get into 3 mindset reset skills. These are your tangible takeaways. These are some of the core concepts from the book in and around self-kindness, earned confidence, which is my chapter 1, and the breakout that we're about to do, and amplified awareness. So the operative question with self-kindness, truly ask yourselves, is there any reason whatsoever why you should be anything less than kind to yourself? Really ask yourself that question. Now, hopefully you find that rhetorical. Some people struggle with that question. And if they do, or if you do, then you know where to start. But it is meant to be rhetorical. Of course, we should be nothing less than kind to ourselves. And what's important here in and around self-kindness is that it's definitive. You're either being kind to yourself or you're not being kind to yourself. And I really look at this as a solution for a lot of what the challenges are in personal development, because I think what a lot of people experience is when they work on themselves, whatever that might be, your confidence, your self-love, your relationship, your self-respect, all of it, your esteem, it all interrelates. You feel a certain way about yourself. You want to feel better about yourself in some way, but it's very difficult to really get your arms around, how do I get from here to there? It can be very vague. But when you infuse self-kindness into that equation and you use that as your barometer, it's definitive. So again, this is something that you work at. There's no in between. Let's look at it from a past baggage standpoint. It's not kind to yourself to hold on to regrets. It's not kind. We talk about forgiveness being about you. It is about you. It's not kind to yourself to hold on to a grudge. So draw the line. If that's making a vow, whatever that is for you, it's definitive. Draw the line and start working at being nothing less than kind to yourself. This is another way to defeat your inner critic, your inner bully. Right? Have the self-compassion. Use this as a barometer. Give yourself grace. Right? Choose progress over perfection. You guys are familiar with all these things that are in the colloquial, exchange, but we have it here just to remind you, because this is where it fits. Right? Now, earned confidence is a grounding concept in the book. It really speaks to the fact that, and why we took inventory, we've all been through everything we have in our lives, whatever that is for you. And we're still here. And so what's definitive there is that we have all proven to ourselves that we are fully capable of overcoming whatever happens to us in real time. So knowing that, and this is, you can't argue it, right? You're still here. That's your rationale for not worrying. Why would you worry about anything? You have to fight back and to train yourself to worry less. If you're worried, you're still going to worry, but push back on it. You're going to handle it. What choice do you have anyway? So this is a way to outsmart your future uncertainties. It's a way to help you just deal with the real and allow your experience to guide you. And what we're doing here is taking stock and reminding yourself in and around your defining experiences. Trust yourself not to worry or be anxious or make assumptions, all of those future uncertainties. If you really have to take it to the extreme, buy into it, to the fact that it's irrefutable. Imagine it's a theorem. The greatest mathematicians and scientists in all of human history could not disprove the fact that you've been through everything you've been through and you're still here. Okay, so what I'd like us to do, Tara, if you can take us for just a few minutes, I think breaking out into, I don't know how many we are here exactly, but maybe a couple groups of 3 if I'm reading. And
Okay.
I'd like you to share what we talked about in and around no substitute for experience. Your greatest personal achievements, or rather professional achievements, your personal triumphs, and your adversities overcome. If you don't want to share your adversities overcome, it's understandable, but whatever it is you'd like to share with the group. All right, so that was ample
Okay.
time. That was ample? Okay. And hopefully you guys found that helpful to share and reinforce, really to take stock for yourselves in and around your earned confidence. On what are you basing your earned confidence? So for our 3 mindsets, reset skills, we talked about self-kindness and drawing the line. We've talked about the definitive nature of earned confidence. Thirdly is amplified awareness. This is the tough one, because we're getting at your automatic negative thoughts, catching yourself in the act, literally repelling your ants. And this is why I suggested, at least maybe for a little bit, that you do some alerts on your phone and use that time for an intentional check-in. Again, it can be your energy, your mood, what's been subsurface conversation that maybe you're not realizing. Have you been present? Take 30 seconds to be present, look around, just a minute. And it takes discipline, which is why the alerts help. I certainly encourage you to do that. Okay. So being purposeful in and around self-kindness, this really harks back to our inner critic, naming your inner critic, and with that, giving yourself grace and reframing yourself in part with affirmations and your inner coach. Okay, so that's amplified awareness. Now, next activity, I'd like everyone to put into the chat 3 words that jump out at them in the word cloud on the screen. What 3 words do you see first? What resonates with you first? And we are gonna keep moving because we still have some ambitious slides, but please, if you can, put that in the chat. What is it that you see? You can't miss positivity, huh? I used the word cloud generator, and Ajit and I were just talking about this. It does seem to be center stage, doesn't it? Love it. Okay, so there are a lot of words here, and they kind of pop out at you in different ways. Happiness, for example, is also part of the equation. But what do these words all have in common? This is an important slide. It's also a little messy. So let's get a little bit of a simpler slide and come at it the same question. What do all of these words have in common? Feel free to drop something in the chat if something comes to mind. Now, the reason why this slide is important is because I do think it anchors the motivation for our topic here. So we have state of being. It's true. That's actually very close. State of being. Okay. The answer. A lot of people say, well, they're all optimistic. They're all positive. Every single thing that you see here can only be experienced in the present. So when you look at, state of being is right there. Honestly, interestingly enough, I mean, I've done this presentation a handful of times. No one's gotten it yet. Interesting. But state of being is very close. And it's a reminder, look at what's on the screen. These are some of the greatest joys in life. This is your motivation to work at being more present, because when you're not, you will not experience the things that you see here. Okay. We're looking for more wow. If you can find yourself, experience something and say wow, you're on the right track. Okay. All right. So putting things into perspective. Remember, we talked about problem solution, unpresence versus presence. While these are not apples to apples, because all of this mindset reset skills apply to all of the unpresence forces of distraction. But there's a parallel where self-kindness is really your main weapon against past baggage, earn confidence against future uncertainties, and being more aware and amplifying your awareness to catch those ants in the act. Okay, so living present now puts us to our third area, 3 facets of an enriched life. These are things that most of us are very familiar with in and around self-care and prevention, and certainly energy consciousness, which is another focus of the book. We're going to spend a few minutes on that, and then having an experiential mindset. So we're all familiar with the self-care. There's no need to spend too much time on a slide like this. Be in shape, eat well, take care of yourself. Emotional intelligence, certainly at the heart of what we're talking about, and keeping the work at that. We talk about being a life athlete. That's a chapter in the book, in and around your lived experiences. One of the things we cover in there is about prevention. A few of us really consider the things that never happen because we prevented them. But clearly, through experience and emotional intelligence, such as heading off an argument from becoming worse, simple example, what can you do to apply your skills to prevent things from getting worse or happening at all? Another tool that's from the original book is also on the website is the self-care report card. I do not put myself forth as being a physical fitness expert, nutrition expert. It's not my wheelhouse, but I do certainly touch on it with some of these tools, this being one of them. And you can see at the bottom, I'm referencing the baselines from some reputable sources. So give that a try. That's on the website, free to download. Energy consciousness, one of my favorite topics. Can spend a whole presentation on this alone. And there are 3 modalities of energy that I speak to, one being personal energy, and we spoke to that in and around your life currency, and within that, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. And a lot of this comes into play for me from an application standpoint in being an entrepreneur. And all of us can relate to this when we have the flexibility, for example, of being home. And rather than managing my day to the best of my ability based on time, I certainly have meetings scheduled and whatnot, I do try to adapt to my energy. I do try to be self-aware of when I am most mentally acute and aligning my personal energy with my most difficult tasks. And you will find, if you want to try that out, be intentional about that, you might find yourself will increase your productivity as a result. Your interpersonal energy. This came up with Ryan earlier. What a positive guy, Ryan, you are. And that your positivity is infectious. At the same time, it's easy to lose sight of the fact that we really do have a personal responsibility to recognize that we affect one another. Essentially not bringing your cruddy mood to somebody else. Or at the same time, you have the opportunity to use good vibes, maybe unknowing to a person who's having a bad day, by trying to make them smile. Right? So we can be intentional about our interpersonal energy, and certainly the one we all hear about and has a lot to do with who we surround ourselves with. And in, let's say, those 5 people, is somebody really just sucking your energy on and on, making decisions, maybe some tough ones to insulate yourself from those people who are sapping your quality of life. And then there's universal energy. So here we're really getting in the area of quantum physics and law of attraction, what it is that you put out into the world, being magnetic. We are all familiar with the law of attraction. Whether you subscribe to it or not, that's something else. But let's just say that the law of attraction is true. Let's just take that leap together, because things start to connect here. Because if you think back to worrying, for example, if the law of attraction is true and you have a tendency to worry, You could be putting the energy out into the universe, as the law of attraction goes, to bring about the things that you don't want to have happen. So it's another great incentive to stop, to work on not worrying, because if you believe in the law of attraction, you really want to recognize that you don't want to be a worrier, because you're being inconsistent with yourself. And then what happens is, if it's true and your worry actually has some kind of causality with bad things happening, then it reinforces you worrying, and you think you were right to worry. Don't worry, you have earned confidence. Okay, over to your experiential mindset. Again, we're all familiar with, we're talking about presence, aspects of presence, working on mindfulness, really being intentional about considering this to be aware, like your happy place, being present, being aware, and then looking for being intentional. I want you guys to practice what is that? What are some things that really motivate you to really tune in? Because we could talk about active listening, for example. And I know for me, and it's taken me a little time to get over this, and we talk about active listening as a skill, some people can take it as being condescending. It's like, what am I, in grade school? You got to tell me to listen better. Like, people tend to take that the wrong way, sometimes understandably, but it really is an active skill. It's an intentional skill, and it has so much to do with experiencing things in real time and working at that. So you're in any interaction with throughout the day, or your spouse or your kids, put everything out of your mind, be present, be where your feet are, and just pay attention and work at that and just practice it. And what I really like about these techniques, whether it's the word cloud we looked at and everything else, is what I'm hoping you're taking away here is some motivation. Why would this be important? What's it worth to you to improve your quality of life? Work at this. And, a lot of us, going back to automatic negative thoughts, right? We put so much energy into things that are obvious to us, to control the world around us, all the external forces that are happening out and around us. But we forget to put energy into controlling our inner forces, things that we're thinking that are taking us down, or controlling our inner forces, such as to experience some of these things. Gratitude, for example, I find it's hard to fit things into a day. Try to embed them. Look at your routines. You got a spin brush, morning and night, that's 2 minutes. So while you're doing your 2-minute spin brush mindfully, be intentional about practicing your gratitude. Okay. The converter, you have routine errands to run. I got to go to the pharmacy. I have to go do this. No. Substitute get for have. I get to go to the pharmacy. I'm waiting in that drive-through line. How grateful I am that there's a modern medicine that's going to make me feel better and make my kid better. Right? Try and tune more into those kinds of conversions to enrich your life. Okay, having an experiential mindset. This is Charlie. For all of you who might not be familiar with him, he's one of my favorite dudes. And we're talking about passion. We're talking about aligning your passion. We're talking about happiness. Again, we're going through these slides quickly because you're all so familiar with them. But what I think is interesting, because I'm not the guy to invent these kinds of things in and around life, but I do think that ikigai, if you've never heard of it, the Japanese concept of ikigai, I just think it's, I don't know, I have that kind of mind where I like to see something like this symmetrical and this structured. I think this has been 2,000 years. They've been at it much longer than any of us have. So check out ikigai for what it's worth. And I think you'll find that there's some influences within it, so very generic, that will give you a little bit more structure to appreciate things and the good things in life. Remember, we talked about building on it, getting perspective in order to be present. Now we're present, right? We've been through that. We're present. This is the good stuff. This is where we get to enrich our lives because we are present with these things. All right, who's ready for an activity? This is a good one. This is one of my favorites. We're all going to be standing up. We're going to be looking through a force of nature. We're going to be combining in a moment. Just hang in there. Well, hang in there. Navjeet's ready, man. He's at the ready. I see you. And all these things we just talked about. It's going to combine it all. Anybody know who this is? Look familiar? The apple is the
Copernicus?
giveaway. It's Sir Isaac Newton,
Oh,
famous
wait.
for any number of things, including he founded the whole white light thing. He also is the founder of geometry. I don't really know that many people thank him for that, but it's true. But he also is most associated with gravity. Now, we're going to do a gravity exercise. This is part of combining all these things with mindfulness. I want you to pretend for a moment that you were lying flat on your back and that someone of equal weight to you decided to step on your chest.
Mm.
How would that feel?
Mm-mm.
Not so hot. It would hurt. We're heavy. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to tune into gravity, and there's a reason for this. So if you want to shut your camera off, feel free, or just step to the side if you're not comfortable, being on camera for this. And I'm going to walk you through. This really is something that can be done in a minute or so, but it's going to take me a little bit longer just to kind of, baby step you through. So stand up, and here we go. What I want you to do is face the part of the room that you feel most naturally faces the world. Kind of like, get your feng shui on. That could be a window, maybe it's the door for you, whatever that is. Feet, natural stance, shoulder length apart. And what we need to really do here is get very, very focused. Focused on only one thing. So this takes total presence and isolated presence. We're focusing on your weight, the pressure of you on this earth. And if you've never done this before, it might surprise you. It might take you a minute or two to acquire this. So I'm just gonna give you the moment. Okay. Focus in only on how heavy you are, as if you were standing on your own chest. That's how heavy you actually are. Once you have this feeling, just as you start to connect with it, I want you to keep going. I want you to root like you're a tree. I want you to imagine that you have roots growing from under your feet into the ground as if you are immovable. And don't bend down with the lower center of gravity, literally. Stay straight up. If you haven't already, as you do that, I want you to close your eyes. Take a cleansing breath or two. Think of something for which you are grateful, or maybe something you wish to manifest in and around the law of attraction, and release it. And then when you're done, put your camera back on. Okay. Now, hopefully you found that connecting with your pressure underfoot was an unusual experience you've never quite tuned into. It's a little bit of it takes hyper awareness, it takes practice, but once you practice this, you'll be able to get it very quickly in a matter of seconds. And it's funny, it's just kind of one of those things, like I can get kind of quirky. I would do this sometimes with 11:11, because if I catch the 11:11, like my chapter 11 in my book is about catching 11:11. So this is where that is in the book. And the whole walkthrough with it. But it's a little meditative, it's a gratitude exercise. It has other applications. One of the ones, because we're talking about emotional intelligence, that I'd like you to consider about this is when you are in an interaction with someone and maybe you're sensing their energy isn't all that great, or the conversation is starting to lean in a wrong direction. When you do this, when you ground yourself physically, it will bring you to center, it will help you stay poised, and it will help you stay, let's say, assertive, right? You're not going to be pushed over. No one's going to knock you over if you're that deeply rooted in the conversation. So practice this in different ways. I hope you found that beneficial and maybe a little fun and something that you'll keep doing. Okay, living presently. This is our classic wrapping things up slide. Time flies when what? Are you having fun? or it flies because you're distracted from the present. Again, the generality, as we get older, the less present we often feel. So your 1 hour mood booster, as an example, being intentional, be prescriptive, just be. Often just be where your feet are is really what we were just doing. Reminder to you of the thought that the utmost source of unhappiness is our living in the not now, and begin to realize how unpresent you are so that you can be more present and shift the paradigm. Experiment with energy instead of time. Experiment with presence to make your days more enriching and not have them or weeks or months blow by. Okay, so again, this is your anchor slide about keeping things in perspective, being present, staying purposeful or intentional. And this is the slide if you want to take the next few slides you can take a screenshot of. Ryan, I did see about sharing slides. I'd be happy to do that. But this is everything we just did in a quick snapshot. So if you need like a little bit of an anchor to help remind you of how these all go together, you're looking at it. You're welcome, Ryan. Now, we talked about learning outcomes, and I asked you to focus on 2, maybe 3 of these. And the challenge again that we have with this topic is that you really aren't necessarily coming away with full-fledged learning outcomes. And the reason is because the slide deck and presentation cannot build these skills for you. You're coming away with what I hope in the next couple slides I'm going to be asking you to take a snapshot of, ways to continue to work at achieving the learning outcomes that you see here. So in and around self-discovery, I'm watching our time, so I'm going to kind of speed up here. In your self-discovery, all these different things. Is there one more? Yes. Take a snapshot of this. This is a summary of the different ways that you might consider going and really taking a one-time snapshot of yourself, whether that's the self-care report card, whether that's the depression defeater, whether that's being intentional, being self-parenting. Okay, everybody got that? Everybody good? Okay. Next, prescriptive activities to practice. I'm just going to put these up. Don't need to spoon feed you guys. Again, I encourage you to take a shot of this. Back to humanizing your inner critic, drawing the line, your self-kindness, your booster routine, these techniques we talk about, gravity, embedding gratitude, shifting the paradigm, experiencing more wow. Okay, these are all the takeaways that I hope that you continue to find the self-encouragement and motivation to keep at this. And as you do it, I think what you will find is that it will increase your motivation to keep doing it because of how much more enriching you're beginning to experience life. Okay, so with that, and I mentioned this to Kara coming into this, for work sites, because my courses are experiential as well as involving social learning, you can go through my website and watch videos and read every word and detailed prospectus. You will not fully understand what my courses are like because they are only understood by doing them. So I offer them for free to do free trials to companies. So if you want 3 or 4 of your people to go through the mindset reset, I believe you'll find that worthwhile and that you'll want to keep going into the other program. The other is that I'm pleased to announce as of yesterday, the book is free. So if you're interested in, at least for now, if you're interested in the ebook or audiobook, zisms.com will take you to the page where you can go and get it. And I hope you do. I'm very proud of all kinds of great reviews that I've gotten. And if you would like to get in touch with me, I decided that I would try and figure out how to have a slide where I could get my name on it more times than any other. And I have achieved that goal, as you can see on your screen. Okay. Now, with respect to time, we were looking at doing another breakout, and we kind of managing time here as well. Kara, I don't know how you feel about this with our last 4 minutes, but these are your ultimate takeaways. right? The learning outcomes, the skills, the actions that you'll take, what 3 things can you be prescriptive about, just threw a lot at you. And this is the reason why I asked you all to customize your experience coming through this presentation so that, again, you could focus on what matters most to you. So while those slides you just took snapshots of are complete, you might decide that there are just to cherry pick the things that you're going to find most beneficial, and obviously only you know that. So I hope that you do. So thank you very much for just having me, and you all know how I'm sure I have a sense of how passionate I am about this, and hopefully you're coming away, the better for it, and we'll continue to as a result. So thanks, guys.
Thank you.